Um, and is this, okay.
So I'm going to discuss with you about how I build the blended learning classroom. Before I do that, I think it's important for me to say that this is my 4th year teaching in a blended learning classroom. Prior to that, I taught 5 years in a traditional classroom. 25 to 30 first graders just with me, no computers, and I was used to it. I was happy with it. And when I was interviewed for this position, they told me, well, how do you feel about your students being on the computers for this many hours? And I didn't think it was healthy for them. I was very skeptical of it, probably much the way you're feeling about it. In doing it, and I had to just kind of be open-minded and say, okay, well, we're all in this for the students. We all want the best for the students. I'm going to just dive in and try it, and since I've done that, in my first year, and I made so many mistakes, in my first year, I noticed better results, even with all those mistakes, than I did the 5 years before. So, and now with learning all those mistakes, I see even greater results my 4th year in. So I'm kind of envious because we didn't have a toolbox. You're getting a toolbox, at least. We had to do it from nothing and just figure it out. So with me, so these are the advantages that we've noticed throughout the whole school, not just with the first grade. We get to do smaller groups. Even though I have 31 students, I get to break my groups into about 10 groups. Sometimes I go even smaller than that for different things. We can, in the small groups, we can meet the students at their levels. Students on the computers, because they do like diagnostics and you can set certain levels, they get to work at their own pace. So you have some kids, I have some kids, first grade, working really on 4th grade materials on the computers, but I have kids working at kindergarten materials on the computer. So it really is at their own pace, and they just go from there. And by the end of the year, all those students who were at kindergarten, they've passed those levels. They are working at grade level material by the end of the year. Probably for me, the biggest benefit, and I think this is because I work with first graders, so those little guys, they're super active. My lessons are 20 minutes. So 20 minutes on the computer, 20 minutes with me, 20 minutes in a different group. They're getting different activities, 20 minutes. And for those little guys and for students with ADHD, ADD, this is really powerful for them to have it in smaller chunks. And then last is when they are with the teacher, you get more engagement. In doing blended learning, I have better relationships with my students. My students get to see my personality more. I get to see their personality more, because when I remember working with 30 students, it was more putting out fires, doing this behavior, taking care of that behavior. In the blended learning model, you're not working on those behaviors so much. They're engaged, so you're really able to see the students, and they're able to see me. It's not perfect. You do still get behaviors. I do sit kids out for recess, so it's not perfect. Kids aren't perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it does get decreased. When we first started, and this is things that we've had to learn along the way, but it really is about building a blended learning culture for your students as well. It's not just for the school, it's for your students within the classroom. One thing we've had to train the kids how to do is when they first started, they would work on the computers and they would work with me. They would work in a different thing, and they really had no idea how to connect all the pieces, how to connect the knowledge to build that core knowledge. And so one thing that we did have to train the kids is when you learn something on the computer and then you hear it with me, share it with the group. Because that is one thing that they have a hard time doing at first, is connecting those pieces. They think it's kind of separate entities, and they don't really know that you bring it together. So that's one thing that we had to teach our students, is how to connect those pieces together. Another thing that we had to train the students is that they really had to look at the computers as a class. They, at home, a lot of them use it for play. They use their tablets for play. They had to know that this is a class. We are looking at grades. We are looking at your results. This is something that you have to be accountable for. And the last thing is that with this, the students are always engaged. So with on the computer, they're engaged, but more importantly, with the teacher, they're very engaged. But the other piece is that when they're on the computers, you want to make sure that they're engaged with the software. And that's where what Dan said, when we had to do the software selection, it's really important to remember that piece, is that they're always engaged, that they don't get too bored with it. So like I just said, to keep the frustration down, you want to keep the students engaged as much as possible. We noticed that students like the programs on the computer that are easy to manipulate, and that your project stations are fun learning environments, and that the time with the teacher is really working on that Common Core, those new Common Core standards, is really working on those. The computers should be easy to use, and I'll show you kind of a slide about one of the programs that we use and why it's easy to use for them. And that the students are also challenged. That goes for your lower students being challenged and your higher students being challenged. If they're not challenged, then they're going to become bored, and then you see the behavior problems. So here's here's basically a dashboard that one of my students would see. It's one of our math programs. And this goes through all three of those steps. This is easy to use. The students know, play the gray. So all they have to do, they click the gray, and it takes them to their level. Because it's leveled, it's challenged. It's very challenging, so they just pace it through as they go. And they're very engaged. This is like their favorite thing to use. One thing that is really important that I do is grouping my students. I use a variety of different data to group my students. I do it with teacher assessments. I do the computer assessments, and we do the formative assessments, and I compile all of those results to group my students. And here you can see kind of what my board looks like when I group my students. Like I said, I have horses, monkeys, and lions. And I also have 2 different colored sticky notes. So if I need to, like if I'm doing a test, I break the class into 2 groups, not into 3 groups. So I have 2 different colored sticky notes, so they're in their color groups, green and blue, but they're also in their animal groups. So there's some flexibility with how you would group also. You want to keep your groups fluid. You don't want to stay committed to this student being in this group for the whole year. So I do use sticky notes so that all I have to do is move things around. And like I said, I do it in 2 different colors so that I don't have to be committed to that 3-group rotation. If I need to do 2 groups, I can do 2 groups. So one thing that I have is the rules. I have the rules in the computers posted. It's very easy. They're clearly defined. It's very visual for the students. Many times if I see a student breaking a rule, all I have to do is go to the poster point to the rule, they see what I'm pointing to, and they correct that behavior. One thing that I do is we practice the procedures before we start the 3-group rotation. We practice for about 2 weeks about how to do it, what I expect, why we're doing it, and it takes about 2 weeks for the kids to really be trained before they're independent with the rotations. And like I said before, the student's outlook on the computers has to be that this is a class. This is not a play tool. This is a learning tool. And there you see my handwritten rules, because I made it my own. I wanted to make sure that these were my rules. This is what I needed for my students. So be safe. They need to walk. One rule that I have is no food or drinks next to the technology. To be respectful of the others around you, so they need to raise their hand if they need anything. That there's no talking in the computer lab, and that they need to wear their headphones. And the other one is being responsible. So they should keep their eyes on the screen, and one of the rules I have is your hand is busy with work, that it's not busy touching the person next to you. And one thing that keeps my kids very engaged is I've learned through my first year that the kids kind of needed incentives to succeed. So I kind of relate it to, well, I come to work and I get a paycheck, and I need to figure out how they can get their paycheck for their work. And so I use these charts, and there are these little sticker charts, and it goes through their progress, and it's based on their learning path. So it's not compared to, oh, well, this kid is smarter than this kid. It's based on how much you are growing. And with the sticker chart, I give rewards. So once a week, they get a certificate. That's more for the parents. And then they get something out of the treasure box. And one thing that's really nice about the sticker charts is I encourage the parents to always come in and check the charts, because you can easily read them. You'll see I have some pictures of the charts. They can easily be read, and that's a pretty powerful tool for you to notice a student that's really falling behind. Really, really great for your higher achieving students that you see falling behind. And then you see the parents and you say, hey, have you come to see the sticker chart? And then they go and see the sticker chart. And then you notice the next day, the kid's starting to try again on the computers. And like I said, the grading with this system is very easy, because it's right there for you and you can see the growth made. So like I said, I build it into technology grade, and this is pretty much how I do it. And there they are.